show what your name is. Do you have a man who you came with?
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. Welcome back, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep 1 foot in the academy and 1 foot in the streets. And we back, and we back, and we back.
You gotta sing this?
Three's Company.
Listen.
All three. What do you say?
Listen, I like the transition that you have made. It used to be real, upbeat, and now we got a little jazzy, a little soul to the intro.
Soul. Listen, you ain't know?
John, are you getting bougie on us?
I am. I think I am getting bougie. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, been living in Atlanta. It's finally rubbing off on you.
I think I am getting a little bad and bougie.
Yeah.
Cooking up dope with the Uzi.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, then that makes me wonder, I shouldn't associate bouginess with jazz, as though you cannot like hip hop and also be whatever, highfalutin or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
dichotomy.
I think bougie got associated with jazz with the Cosby Show, because all the episodes. Yeah,
for sure. For
that's
sure.
when we was like, black upper class listen to have black art all around their house. They listen to jazz music.
Mm-hmm.
As the kids are waking up, brushing their teeth.
Black people don't listen to what? Sorry.
Now, you know what I think is gonna be now? I think the black upper class music is gonna be 90s hip hop.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, for sure. I can see that for sure.
That's also going to be an age thing though, too, because it's just like,
that's true.
Because then in 50 years, will the upper black people listen to quote unquote Future? It's like, Future.
We didn't even make it 2 minutes into the episode before this man to come up. Let me check my blood. Okay, now my heart rate is at 5,000.
You know I gotta bring my guy in. You know I got to.
Future, if you are listening, please stop everything that you're doing. Just choose a different path.
Listen, we got to. I got to bring him in every episode. But no, that's true though. As the people who listen to certain types of music progress, will that be the soundtrack to our class? That's interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, it's people who will become classic, and it's the idea of conservatism. And as people age and typically get more conservative, is typically just really about the past and holding on to a certain era. So,
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Well, this era is kind of like what I call emo soul, like that. Like Summer Walker and like SZA, like that sort of just like emo type of music, but like ethnic. I think that'll be like the next wave.
That's a really good. I really like that though. Emo soul. Like they because I remember when that emo music was out when we were young, and we was like, yo, that's weird. White people stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then like there were a couple of artists like Nicki Minaj, Kanye, like a couple of like 2010 artists that started kind of incorporating that emo music into there, and that was the stuff the little kids was listening to, the mainstream stuff that they were listening to. So that's a good. I really like that genre title right there, emo soul.
I don't know what it's called for real, but that's what I call it.
Yeah, I like Summer Walker though. I like some. She's super talented.
She's super talented.
She's really talented.
Yeah. I just feel for her. I feel like it's so important for people like her who suffer from social anxiety to be around people who really love them and who are really down.
Yeah. So. Amber, you sound low. Me and Jackie sound a lot higher than you do. You sound low. Your volume is pretty low.
Like, hi, should I talk louder?
That's better.
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay, I just need to get closer.
Yeah.
It's better, but I'm thinking I don't know if your levels are just down on your computer or something.
You know what? Let me turn off my AC, and I'm also gonna get my earphones.
Okay. Emo Sizzle. No, I like that though. That's good. Because I get, now that I think about it, like when my daughter's in the car, I mean, I listen to some of the new music, but for the most part, like she's gonna grow up on like the 90s and 2000s hip hop and R&B that I liked, you know what I'm saying? And that's probably what she'll end up listening to a lot, you know, when she's in the car. That'll be the old school.
Yeah, that is wild to think of, because, you know, of course, now I'll put on like a Patti LaBelle, a Gladys Knight or whatever, if I'm like cleaning up on the weekend.
Right.
Part of that is because like that's what I listened to when I was little, when I didn't have a say-so on what comes on the radio.
Right.
What I think is going to be interesting is that we will be in a stage soon where we will be listening to, where it will be common to listen to a century worth of music, because like the 1950s is not that far. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the oldest song that I listened to, or at least the idea that at least a century worth of music will be available to us to actually like from audio, and like it might be on Apple Music. Like I think that's interesting to me. And I'm like, as we continue to get older and older, like I believe all of us will make it into the 2050s. It won't be strange to listen to music from the 1950s. That's a century worth of music that we'll be listening to.
That's good. That's a really good point.
That is a good point, because I'll play music in my classes, and even if I'm playing like an older song, like students still know, especially if it's like a popular, like maybe like a Michael Jackson. I mean, I know that's not the 50s, but you know, just thinking that these kids were born in the 2000s, but they're singing songs that are like, I guess 50 years old at this point, if these are songs in the 70s.
Right.
And they're still like, oh yeah, you know, I know this song, whatever. So yeah.
I mean, I do that a lot with my students. Like I don't automatically assume that they know certain artists.
Yeah.
Because I've done that before where I'm like, oh, I'm playing this person, and somebody will raise their hand and say, I have no idea. So now I don't take it for granted. But then I remember like one time I said, you know, I know you all may not know who Tupac is, but blah, blah, blah. And they were like, Professor Grant, we know who Tupac is. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, y'all don't know who, you know what I'm saying? Like, I say Outkast, and you're like, huh? You know, so
that hurts my heart. What?
Outside of Atlanta, like teaching other students, it's like they don't really know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I had students who didn't know.
Master P or something, they don't know.
Yeah, I had students who didn't know Tupac when I brought in like one of his songs for class. So
I don't know how to feel about it.
Yo, how y'all been doing before we get into this topic? How y'all been doing? How's life? It's been a minute since, has it been a minute since all three of us?
All three of us, yeah.
I think it was the one episode.
It's been a couple weeks though.
It's just been a few weeks, because we learned about, what was that phrase? Ungendering.
Oh, the ungendering.
Together. Yeah. I just watched that episode the other day, so I'm like, this is crazy.
That was a good episode, the ungendering. But I think it's been a minute, so.
I'm actually one thing that I'm looking forward to is getting my finances together. So I feel like this is an appropriate conversation, because even today I attended like a Grow with Google seminar about how to get investors for a small business, and it was a decent conversation. I mean, it's free. And so I'm looking forward to just trying to make some moves in my personal life so I can become more financially literate, more business literate, all of that.
Nice.
So that's the latest and greatest for me.
Okay.
Listen, we are coming to the end of the semester, so I am looking forward to the next several weeks of not having to get up and look at people in their face. That sounds so bad. Shout out to the teachers. It's teacher appreciation.
Appreciation to both of you.
Shout out to the teachers, man.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to summer break. And it's not even like, you know, in summer, like teachers don't work, because teachers work year round, but the like cadence of work is different. So I'm looking forward to that. Maybe not getting up so early, not feeling pressed by deadlines. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes.
Okay.
What about you, John?
Man, life has been good. Life has been really good. It's been I have no major complaints. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the summer. What else is happening? I'm planning my vacation, so that's good.
Yeah.
My birthday's coming up.
Yeah.
Oh yes, you're a Gemini. What you doing?
I'm a Gemini. My birthday is coming up. Dr. Hader, you just had a birthday. So
I did.
Thank you.
Thank
You know what I'm
you.
saying? Well, okay, so before I continue, what did you do for your birthday?
So I channeled Dr. Hader and got into some bougie stuff.
Yeah.
We went to DC. We went to a very bougie restaurant that served dogs, like had a dog menu. It served dogs.
Serve dogs or they serve dogs?
First of all, you know, I don't even eat any kind of animal, chicken, dog, or anything. I don't fool with that.
You're saying you ain't learned that from me. I don't eat no dogs.
No, dogs were welcome in the restaurant, and that's not something that I usually like. Our dog is not even allowed in the kitchen.
I was gonna say you done changed since you done got upper class.
No, it doesn't even.
You done switched up.
I know, right? But we ended up having to take our dog with us, and so my boo was thoughtful enough to like find a place that could accommodate us having our dog with us. Nice. So we ate on the patio, and we've been to like restaurants. I mean, you live in Atlanta, and I'm sure people have been to restaurants where people will like bring their dog, and their dog is just like chilling on the floor as they like eat or whatever. So we went to one of those restaurants. It had a dog menu. It had like they brought the dogs like ice water in like a little bowl, like with little ice cubes in it.
That's funny.
And we just hung out in DC for the day.
Nice.
It was, you know, DC's my favorite city, so any reason to go.
Oh, I didn't realize it was your favorite city.
Yeah, to me, DC feels like a happy mix of New York and Atlanta. And there are some things
very true.
Yeah, there are some things that I don't like about New York, some things I don't like about Atlanta. And I feel like DC is like a happier version of both of those cities.
Okay.
Fair. We'll have to talk about what you don't like about Atlanta at a later time. As an Atlanta native.
I was gonna say I like DC too. I was just in DC a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Amber, I got up with Gabby. Me and Gabby spent the whole day together. So you know we talked about you. So, I got pictures and everything. I'll send them to you.
Oh my
goodness. But yeah, we went to Busboys and Poets and we ate and just chilled.
Cackled,
and yeah, I agree with you. I love DC. I think DC is a great city. It's one of my favorite cities. It's not my overall favorite city, but it is.
Is it New York or New Orleans?
My favorite city that I've been to in the United States is Harlem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was for sure. But my favorite place that I've lived and that I probably will live will be Atlanta for sure. Atlanta's like just top for me. But, yeah, Atlanta's but it was a good change of pace though. When I visited, it was a good change of pace, and it was a different type of black city. Atlanta's a certain type of black city. Yeah, Harlem is a different type of black city, which I thought was really dope. But I agree with you. DC is like, if I got an opportunity to move and live in DC, I would do it for sure.
I don't know if I would live in DC. Like I said that I wouldn't like mind living in Baltimore. And this is like partly because there's like more, at least it feels like there's like more variance in Baltimore, like as far as class. DC just feels like super expensive and like just flat in terms of class. Even in like the suburb areas surrounding DC.
It can be pricey. I lived in Maryland for a little while and I did like. But what was funny was I felt like certain parts of Maryland were so much like Atlanta. I was like, why am I not just in Atlanta? I might as well just go home, you know? But it is beautiful to be in between two larger cities. Like, so you have DC and you have Baltimore. And so then there's stuff and also not stuff in between. It's interesting, but Atlanta's not really like that. I feel like there's not another big city or supposedly big city, or not, I'm not going to say big city because Baltimore is not necessarily big. It's just a place with a lot of history and a higher population. I mean, because Atlanta, I guess you could say Augusta, Macon, like where are you gonna say?
Birmingham,
but that's 2 hours. That's 2 hours away, you know. So
yeah. I love the fact that when I went, my friend Gabby, she's been living in DC for a very long. She's from, or she's not from DC, but she's lived there for a very long time. And we just talked a lot about just like race and class and, you know, the changes in DC. And she helped me demystify the idea that DC is slowly losing its chocolate city status. And she was like, I don't like the fact that people keep saying that, because, you know, she works on the Hill and she's like, no, DC is still very black. Gentrification is happening. But just like in Atlanta, them black folks is fighting tooth and nail to stay in that city. And that city is still majority black. And she said it doesn't seem that way until it's time to vote. And that's why white people can't get into the politics in DC, because black people holding on to it. And that's the same way it is in Atlanta. And so I like that idea.
I feel like the white people who live in DC proper are probably gonna vote in similar ways. Yeah. The black folks that are like, they'll probably vote in similar ways to black folks in terms of like voting democratically, voting for Democrats, not democratically.
Yeah, I think so too. I did mention that. I think there's a different type of white that people that are moving to DC, but just in terms of the population and the influence that black people have is still very strong, especially from a political standpoint. So I thought that was really good. We had some really good discussions. She helped kind of shape my ideas around it. So shout out to DC, man. And shout out to you for your birthday.
Yeah. Thank you. Celebrate me, affirm me. I appreciate it.
Black Queen.
Black Queen.
Wasn't it Snoop that was like, and lastly, I want to thank myself.
Listen, I want to thank me. I was in there writing the rhymes.
Yeah.
I've been on stage performing for these fools.
Yeah.
Me goddamn.
Yeah.
That's great.
But yeah, like but yeah, my birthday is coming up, and I finally decided what I wanted to do. Okay. What I want to do for my birthday. So I want to go to, because I'm winding down my 30s and going into which is actually goes into our next podcast episode. I'm winding down my 30s. I'm going into my 40s. I'm thinking differently about life and whatnot. A lot of change is happening. And I said, I need to practice this whole self-care thing. Because I be seeing my women friends doing it and just going to get massages. I said, I want to go to a Korean bathhouse.
There's one in Atlanta.
It's like 10 in Atlanta.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them. But I want to go to a Korean bathhouse. I've gotten it for someone as a gift, but I've never done it for myself. And so I want to go there. I want to buy, like, you know, get the massages, get the foot massages and the deep tissue massages and all that. Do like stay there for like, you know, the whole 24 hours. Yeah. And I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do like a self-care type day. And then I'm gonna get another tattoo. So I'm gonna get my second tattoo.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do for my birthday.
Which place are you going to in Atlanta?
Which what?
Which place?
I think it's called Jeju.
Jeju. Okay.
Jeju.
I've heard of it. I still haven't been, but I've heard great things, and I want to go.
Yeah, I've been to Jeju a few times, mostly before it got popular, and I started laughing when you said that you're gonna do the massage and like relax and stuff, because I think it might have been like the first or second time that I went there, I got the body scrub. And I was like, you know, I'm really excited about this body scrub. Like, I don't know how it's going to go, but I want this body scrub, you know, let me feel glowy and, you know, get my skin together and everything. And I did not realize, so they put you on this table, kind of like the table that you're on when you go to the doctor's office. They pull like that big paper sheet over it, but the table's kind of like plasticky. So they had me on this table, and the first thing that they did was like they got this big bucket of water and like they doused me with it. And then the lady came in with like the scrub, and I felt like I was just like a fish. Like she was just flipping me and scrubbing and like flipping and scrubbing. And I was like, this is not relaxing. This is not what I thought it was gonna be.
Like an Alaskan salmon.
Yeah. But my skin was amazing after that. So I do recommend it, but I also recommend not thinking that it's gonna be like
wearing floaters, because clearly
Yes. Yes. And now this is before they got popular, because Black folks weren't going there, because when she threw that water on me, she like also threw it on my hair. Yes. And then at some point she like threw more water on it and started washing my hair. I was like, no,
washing your hair. Hell no.
Yeah, because Black people weren't going there at that time.
So she didn't know.
Yeah, but like I don't know if it was like several months later or like a year later that I went. By that time, I guess Black folks had started going more frequently. So she was like, you want the hair treatment? I was like, no, I'm good.
She found out. Some black lady came up. Bitch, sorry, I did not know. Like,
they learned. Wait, so Jackie, you didn't tell her you weren't one of the Black people who said, hey, no, lady?
No, it wasn't. She didn't ask. Yeah, she didn't ask.
And it was like, it's done. There's no reason to.
So the first time she threw the water on me, and I don't know, I think my hair was like twisted or something.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, all right, you can't get my hair wet at all.
Right.
But then she started putting whatever random product they have. I'm like, nah, we got to draw the line. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it's gonna do. Let's move right on.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. Now, I did hear that a friend of mine told me that same Jeju spot. I don't know if this is true. I didn't check, but they told me that this is what happened. So, check it out, research it for yourself. But a couple of years ago, they were actually under investigation for being a spot where traffickers were sex trafficking kids through that spot. From what I understand, it wasn't the place that was involved. It was people who worked there who were like getting paid to be quiet as people were bringing kids in there. And so once they found out, they like fired all the people and like vetted the whole. So I don't want to speak down on the place, but from what I understand, there were people who were working there who were involved with people who were sex trafficking kids.
Oh, wow.
So
I wouldn't be surprised, not because of the establishment, but just in how prevalent sex trafficking is in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I remember going to an event once in like one of the super fancy hotels in Atlanta, and I went to the bathroom and I saw like in the women's bathroom on the wall, there was like this plaque that said, if you're being sex trafficked, like call this number, like use the phone, call this number so that we can come and help you. And I think there was like a phone in like the bathroom area. There was probably like a little sitting area or whatever in the bathroom. And it stood out to me because I was like, this is an incredibly fancy hotel. Like you're paying, I think it might've been the Four Seasons. So you're paying like a lot of money to stay here for a night, but also it wasn't like a sign, like a little printed out sign. So it's like, if you're making a permanent installation, like this is a thing, like, so yeah, it's a thing in Atlanta for real.
I said, all right, I'm gonna be looking out when I get there. So yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, it's been nice to catch up that little bit. That was good.
I know. That was good. That was good. All right, y'all. What we talking about? What we getting into?
We got a lot to discuss. Like the topic is meaty. When we were talking about yeah, Amber brought it up like you do, Amber, dropping the little diamonds and just brought up, what do you have to do to survive in this country, just given everything that's going on around us right now with like the different policy changes that are happening across the country, the breaking news about Roe v. Wade. So, I like that question. What do we need to do to survive in this country, both like from a policy standpoint and from an economic standpoint?
As Black people.
That's
the piece of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to do off the Georgia Dome real quick?
Yes.
I mean,
what's the answer to what do you do? How do you survive as a Black person in America?
Yeah, you might gotta either move off the grid, or out the country, because they are coming for our neck out here.
it's funny when we were talking about this in the kind of like the pre-show and just the preparation for the episode. You know, I'm a Kanye stan. I know y'all ain't Kanye stans, but before he started tripping, he actually has a song on his album Dark Twisted Fantasy, and the last track on the album is called Who Will Survive in America, and it's based off of Gil Scott-Heron's poem Who Will Survive in America. And so every time y'all said that, I was thinking I've heard the song a bunch of times. Who will survive in America? Who will survive in America? And yeah, that's a really good question, because it's not to say who will live in America. You know what I'm saying? Like I think America, or the United States, is a place that, and I don't necessarily like just saying America, because you have North America, South America, Central America. So, and I think, but particularly in the United States of America, I feel like many people will live, but I don't know if many people will survive and thrive.
Yeah.
Because the United States has always been a place of a survival of the fittest, right? Like who can withstand? And it's just always a struggle. And like we talked about, it's going to take battles on so many fronts to answer that question. You know what I'm saying? Who will survive and who will thrive in America? So
yeah,
that's kind of what I thought about.
I'm so glad you went before me, because you gave me that framework of thinking. Something that I would struggle with a lot is the idea of just surviving and not thriving. And because I feel like in some instances, I have had to lower my expectations as a person living in America, to go from just thriving to surviving, because I'm like, well, here we are again. And so it's just like, I just need to make it. But I'm like, I'm so tired of just making it, because that's part of survival, is just like, you're like 51% alive, 49% dead, or you're prey, you know, or you're victim or something. It's just like, you're just like barely, like you're just over that edge. And that is exhausting. And I'm not interested in survival. I'm really interested in thriving. And when I think about being Black in America, like how to thrive in America, I feel like I'm moving more toward basically detachment. And I say that because, or the philosophy of detachment, where it's just like, you insulate yourself from as many of the isms and the systems as you can, so that you can thrive. Because I feel like in some ways, too much interaction with them or too much knowledge of them actually can reduce your quality of life, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of that. Because it really is like, the more you know, the worse you feel.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I kind of feel that way. So let's get into this discussion then. So we'll start off with you, Jackie. Tell us about the beginning of this survival of the Black child.
Oh gosh. So folks might have heard about this leak that happened at the Supreme Court, where there is a majority opinion kind of striking down Roe v. Wade. And so historians out there, y'all can correct me where I get things wrong, but back in the 70s, way back in the 70s, the case came before the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, I guess. I feel like I've heard other Roe v. terms, but Roe v. Wade came before the Supreme Court, legalized abortions across the country. Fast forward to now, we have 3 new justices that were appointed under the former president. And 2 of them, Kavanaugh and Comey Barrett, I remember distinctly watching their confirmation hearings, and I remember pointed questions about Roe v. Wade. And I remember both of them saying that Roe v. Wade is settled law, like there's no need to revisit it. It's settled law. We're not trying to overturn Roe v. Wade. Whether or not like they should be believed is a different and maybe extended conversation. You know, any man that would lie about sexually assaulting a woman under oath, would he lie about other things?
Yes.
Probably. So, yeah. Fast forward now, we know that Justice Alito has penned this opinion that represents what we believe is the majority of the court, meaning 5 justices who are suspected to be Alito, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Comey Barrett, and maybe there's Clarence Thomas. Good old Clarence.
Good old Clarence.
Yeah, so those 5 are believed to be the ones who are crafting this opinion, and I think it's close to 100 pages. And part of the scandal is that it was like leaked. Like there are no leaks from the Supreme Court. Wow. And so the fact that this was leaked, and it's not even just like my mom's sister who's a clerk told my brother's uncle something. No, it's like an actual document, like a detailed document. It's like a big deal that there's a leak. But of course, there's also a big deal that the Supreme Court is now undermining and overturning Roe v. Wade. And that is a big deal, because what is said in this opinion, in this majority opinion, is that the argument for Roe v. Wade, I can't remember the exact word that was used in the document, but basically it's like a synonym of weak. Like there's a weak argument for this. And that to me feels a little scary, because you could also say there's a weak argument for lots of other civil rights that people have. So that's kind of where we are right now. Oh, and something else that's really important is that in 24 states, so about half the country, there are trigger laws. So as soon as this decision comes down from the Supreme Court, 24 states will automatically trigger an abortion ban. And in this opinion, there's no sort of exemption. So there's no exemption for rape, there's no exemption for incest, there's no exemption for if the mother's life is in danger. It's just you pregnant, you got to have this baby.
Wow. Can either you or Amber give us the background to Roe v. Wade, right? So that just our listeners can know, okay, what essentially does Roe v. Wade say? Why was it significant? So that we can know to label this thing unconstitutional and to eradicate it or to roll it back. What are you kind of already talked about the results of it.
Yeah.
So kind of take us back a little bit to why it's been important.
I'm gonna tell you what I think I know.
Okay.
So, people can correct, but it's interesting because this happened in the 70s. Like this happened before any of us were here. So we never knew a time, like we always have known Roe v. Wade, like that has just been a part of our life. And what I have always heard and learned is that Roe v. Wade gave women autonomy over their bodies in terms of being able to seek access to legal abortions. Like that's a key distinction, because just because abortions are not legal does not mean that people will not get abortions. They will just be much more dangerous because they're underground. In some ways, we could think about it like illegal drugs. Like people can still go, like people are still going to go and buy and get access in whatever ways they can. It's just far more dangerous if they can't just go down to the CVS and get what they need.
Right.
So similarly, Roe v. Wade opened the provision for people to provide legal abortion in states across the country, and states could not outlaw abortion. Now, there have been many states that have put provisions in place. I think some of the ones have been like 24 weeks, like meaning that you're pretty far advanced into your pregnancy if you're 24 weeks along. What is that, like 6 months? And at that stage, from what I understand, women aren't just having abortions at that point because they're like, I don't want to have this baby anymore. It's real, like you've been preparing for this baby for a while. Like something devastating has probably happened if you're seeking an abortion at this stage. So Roe v. Wade made it legal for providers to provide abortion and for women to seek them. So that includes like early like abortion pills, like morning after pills, things like that. And I don't know if those things become illegal because like morning after pill like interrupts conception. And there's some other like really early procedures that people can do. But from what I understand, some of the bills that are now coming up in the States are as early as 6 weeks.
Right. That's the part that I heard. And that's that's barely enough time for a woman to notice that she missed her period.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know a lot about the Roe v. Wade case at all. I've never like actually read about it. Like I think I've read about it like in the past and not remembered it, you know. And what I've been learning just from today is that what people are really looking at with this is how the reason why Roe v. Wade was able to they were looking at the 14th Amendment as a way out for whatever abortion was. It's something about privacy and that's why it worked. And so it's the 14th Amendment was also what many civil rights acts and things like that or civil rights legislation rely on. And so that's what makes this particularly dangerous for Black Americans because it's like, hey, what else might come down, and not to go to, you know, the slippery slope reasoning or the beginning to hypothesize and create like, you know, worst case scenario situations. And yet the last few years have really shown us a lot about what it means to be protected in America by the law. And so it's very interesting to see that this is something that affects all races of women. If that is coming down, then something that affects mostly Black women or Black people definitely probably won't have that protection. So that's where for me, that's where I'm seeing the concern, and that's where I'm like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah. And I mean, the overlap between women who are Black, other women of color, and women who live in poverty, like the Venn diagram is like, it bends, like there's a large overlap. And so it wouldn't be a stretch to say that this new law of the land will affect mostly women of color. But I also have heard that it is a way to increase the white population, because certainly lots of white women decide for whatever their reasons are that they don't want to like carry a pregnancy through. And that's their choice, that's their body, that's their decision to make. But that could be one way to interrupt the population, or to interrupt the population demographic trend that we are seeing as far as people of color and Black folks becoming the majority in this country.
The thing about this Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court case that allowed for women to have more rights over their bodies and the choice to have or not have a child, the fact that it helped to advance other civil rights for other people, right? It starts to set the precedents.
Right.
What I think is extremely important for not just women and Black women, but for men to understand as well, is that clearly there has a direct correlation to us, the men who are involved in these pregnancies. But also
that part,
the rollback that will happen with other civil rights cases, because if you can start to have a say over what a woman does with her body, you start to send this dehumanizing message to women, to a minority group, to say that the state has control over what you can and can't do because we don't believe that you have the wherewithal to make that decision for yourself. What else is going to come along after that? It's going to be immigrants. It's going to be Black people. It's going to be children. It's going to be other people that are not part of the white, heterosexual, Protestant, male privileged group. And so it's extremely important for men, particularly Black men, just on the strength alone, that this has a direct negative effect on our sisters. But not only that, somewhere down the line, there is going to be a law that is passed or that is prevented from being passed that will directly affect brothers and men. So it's extremely important for us to take this seriously, because, you know, like we said earlier, all of this is really just a direct attack on the advances that have been made by groups like, in the movements like Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, and the what was that in the 2000s, the Occupy Wall Street movement, though short-lived. These movements that kind of lean more towards liberal ideas have helped to increase the consciousness among U.S. citizens across racial groups. And with this attack on critical race theory, I think that was kind of the head of it. And so with that attack on critical race theory, now these conservatives, which really wasn't an attack on critical race theory, but it was an attack on Black people and on Black history and on the advancement of Black consciousness and Black ideas and truth, essentially. And so now this is being done to say, we've gone too far, right? We done had a Black president for 8 years. Now we got, you know, they had their Trump run. Now Biden's in office. And while he's not necessarily, you know, what we want, there was some level of mitigation, some level of impeding the conservative agenda. And so I think this is just a way to help ensure that life goes on, like the status quo was not interrupted. And so we have to take this very, very seriously, just for some people who just feel like, oh, you know, particularly Black conservative men who are just kind of like, oh, well, you know, I mean, I have an uncle who, I mean, a lot of Black conservative men supported Trump because they were Christian, right? Because they did not believe in abortion, because they did not, you know, their Christian conservative upbringing didn't allow for that. But we don't realize that, okay, you may be anti-abortion, but the things that's going to come along with that, I don't think you're going to be ready for that. I don't think you're going to be ready for that rollout. So I think it's important for us to realize the long-term effects of this, and how this passing of this could affect more groups.
Yeah. Go ahead, Amber.
The conflation of like Christianity and anti-abortion and all that, it just completely enrages me. I feel like so full of fire right now. But what I will say is even the idea that abortion is just a women's issue is so beyond me. For because sure. I'm baffled at how much men take themselves out of that story. As though women get pregnant by themselves, right. As though this is just, it's like
it's so much, it is her body and it's a life, and you were involved in the process. You were in relationship with this person. You had sex with this person. I am so confused and just dumbfounded as how men take themselves out of this. I just don't understand what is, like, what's missing? Like, what's the gap? What's the link that to help men see that the abortion issue is their issue? Because that is a part, they were a part of that process. Like, and this is where it's just like patriarchy is so insane to me, and how men are socialized to think about sex and sex being just something that they can enjoy, like their freedom of sex versus women. It's just so different. And I just don't even know what to say about it. I just don't understand how men see it as not their own issue as well.
I actually see it as like the inverse of that. Like, I feel like men see it as their issue, and that's why they're inserting themselves into the conversation. Like, yeah, just in terms of like some of like the common tropes that I hear are like, well, it's, you can argue that it's the woman's body, but it took two people to create this baby. And so, she can't just go and decide to do whatever she wants to do, because what if the man fill in the blank with whatever that whatever. Yeah, fill in the blank with whatever. But a lot of the argument that I hear is always in consideration of the man, of other people, of community, of all these other things other than the woman and what she wants in her health and her well-being, and not just her physical health, but like her mental health, her financial health, like all of those things. And so I think that men see it as their issue to like speak on and insert themselves in that conversation.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, it's the way that they see it as their issue, as a way of controlling the woman. And that's exactly. So that's different from what I'm thinking about. I guess I'm looking at it like it's the relationship with the person and what's happening in her body, and you being a part of that thing that's happened to her body. Like, that's the part where it's just like, it's the absolving of any kind of responsibility to her, to you. Like, that's the part where I get confused too, because the idea like, oh, well, it's my baby too, she shouldn't have to be able to have the abortion. It's just like, well, sir, that's not how this particular situation works. I guess it's just I just feel like it's the overall like sensitivity and understanding that just seems to be missing in just like the most personal of ways. Like, I'm just struck by that. How so many women feel alone in the process from the person who created, who helped, participated in this situation. And that's only, of course, in consensual situations. Right. Of course, in the situations where it's not consensual, it's like, that's even just, it's like you attach that to trauma and decision making, and it just continues to be a clusterfuck. Like, I just it's so much more than just like, this is a new life that has been formed, we need to keep it. It's like, and I think one of the things that bothers me the most about like pro-lifers is just their idea of like, they're just pro-birth. They just want the baby to be born. They don't really care about the quality of life of the child. They don't even really care about life, because they also be the same ones who support the death penalty or support other things that will completely minimize people's quality of life. So it's just it's so conflated, and it just makes me so upset.
I want to raise a question, because this brings up an interesting caveat. I want to preface it by saying I am pro Roe v Wade. I am pro-choice from a legal standpoint, and I believe that a person should have the right to decide, particularly women, particularly Black women, should decide what they want to do with their bodies. I believe that all the way around. With that being said, I agree, and it sounds like you all are saying that this directly affects men, right? Roe v. Wade, abortion, legalizing abortion, or taking away abortion rights have a direct effect on men, because men are a part of the creation process. And so to try to take ourselves out of it is wrong, right? Essentially, it directly affects us. With that being said, though, I wonder what your response is when a woman does decide to get an abortion without consulting the father, because I know that has happened, and I know that has been a part of the conversation where women will decide that they won't keep the child. And then if somebody says, well, are you going to tell the father or are you going to consult with the father? They'll say, well, it's my body, my decision. And while that is true, if men are directly involved in the making and the process and the legal and all these things that we're saying, then I think that should be a conversation between the mother and the father before that decision is made. And I've always felt that way. That should be a conversation. I do believe that ultimately the decision is with the mother because she's carrying it. But I'm just interested in hearing you all's perspective. If the man is like, innately and integrally involved in this process all the way around and should not separate himself, then is it okay for him to also be a part of that decision-making process, at least in knowing or at least having a conversation with the mom, and the idea that the mom just doing, just having an abortion without even saying anything to him, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot. There might be stuff in there that I might take issue with, but your general premise in terms of should there be a conversation? Should two people have agreement? Absolutely. Both parties in an ideal situation, both parties will be involved. Both parties will come to consensus. Yeah. I'm not even addressing
I'm not talking about the other.
So both parties who are consenting parties come to an agreement, enter a sexual relationship, talk about what they want the outcomes of the sexual relationship to be. One person might say, I'm ready for being a parent. The other person might say, I am too. And so if the woman gets pregnant, then hopefully they're still on the same page. The inverse might occur of I'm not ready for all that right now. Well, neither am I. All right, cool. The decision is easy. Ultimately, if that conversation doesn't take place, or even if the conversation does and people are on different pages, it's unfortunate, in terms of the contention that it has the potential to bring, but ultimately, that woman has autonomy over her body. And that's something that men should accept and understand as a consensual sex partner, that we are entering this consensual relationship. If there's disagreement with what happens with this woman's body as an outcome of our sexual relationship, I have to be okay with that, because it's not my body. She's the one that's going to have to face different things going on. Hopefully her health is all fine and good, but she's the one that's going to have to deal with all that. And she's going to have to be the one, when we look at statistics about whose life gets more disruptive, is it the mom or the dad? If we're talking about heterosexual binary relationships, but we have so many stats to show that women bear the burden of childbearing. And so the woman really, as she's carrying this child, really has to decide, am I ready for all of the things that's gonna come along with it? Children interrupt women's careers in ways that it doesn't for men. And so it's a decision that women have to be fully comfortable with, and men have to wrap their minds around that.
And for me, I feel honestly, it's a case-to-case situation. And I say that because there are so many mediating factors in any situation, because even the idea of and this is only when it comes to consensual. Non-consensual is completely up to the woman. Consensual, I think about even asking, like, should there be communication between the father and the mother? That would presuppose that they even have good communication and that they even have a relationship at all. And I think that there are so many factors that a woman is weighing when she's considering whether or not she wants to experience this lifelong process at this point, especially when it comes to this lifelong commitment with another person. And have those two individuals, the mother and father, ever even had lifelong conversations? So it makes me wonder, like, I don't want to say that she should have to talk to him. I think when I think about sex and the fact that unprotected sex and sometimes protected sex can produce a child, can produce an offspring, I think it's not necessarily pragmatic to consider ideal situations, because more than likely in the most ideal situations, there's going to be a communication and they probably will have the child in a lot of instances. I don't think that's where most people have abortions. Well, those abortions that I think are the most controversial being the ones that seem to be just elective, because there are some, of course, you mentioned before, there are the abortions where this is a medical reason, it's a threat to the body. Those ones seem to be kind of the no-brainers, where people say, you know what, you should probably have the abortion or the woman can choose, right? And so I'm not talking about those either. I'm talking about the situations where it seems as though the woman is being like flighty, because I think that's what people have in their minds. Like, she's just being promiscuous and she's having unprotected sex. And so she's deciding whether or not she wants to have a baby or not. And so those are the situations where I really want to zoom in on, and then think about, like, of course, if there were to be research, and I have not read any of the abortion research to see, like, all of the reasons why women make these decisions. I just think that it's so contextual that I don't think there's one principle there, period, to say she should absolutely talk to the man. I think that there are just so many factors that someone involves. That doesn't mean that the man is not involved in that process, and that it would not be, I'm not going to tell her that she has to talk to that man, because I don't know what level of communication they've had even before they started being in sex, why they're even in a sexual relationship. There's just so many factors with that. And so I won't speak to the hypothetical. I do think, the hypothetical ideal of there being communication and it being able to be a decision, a decision between the two people. I can just say that I think what's important is that women are really, because the decision does ultimately come down to the woman, that women have the resources to make the most well-informed decisions that they can, and whatever that well-informed is, they have that input, whether it is adoption information, whether it's like information about I don't even know what information mothers get right before they decide to have an abortion, whether that information is the opinion and the thoughts and the feelings of the father, whether it's the opinions of her family, because a lot of times the father might not be the one who she could realistically even rely on for the thing, or even think that he might have an opinion. It might be her family who might have greater pressures and things like that. So I just feel like the woman in that moment needs to be equipped with all the information and support that she can have to make the decision that will ultimately affect her more than anybody else.
To respond to that last part, and I agree with a lot of everything that y'all said, but in terms of being equipped with, number one, all the resources, which I agree, which comes from the state, right? Part of that is the state, having options, having the legal backing to be able to make the best decision for her. I agree with that part. Information, I also think that information can come from, you know, from the books, from the clinics, from everything, all her options, as well as information that the father can provide in terms of options for the child, which is why I think that I think it, and I don't know if we want to take the conversation here or we just want to focus on how messed up the, you know, the whole Roe v, you know, the whole rolling back of Roe v Wade is, which again, I think we're all in 100% agreement on that. But I just felt kind of led to just kind of bring that up to say, particularly when we were just talking about how integral the man is in this part. I'm just kind of like, okay, well, if the man is so integral and if this directly affects him so much, then he can't just be integral in this part, but then not integral with a conversation about whether to have the child or not. Because there are men that I've heard of situations where men want to have the child, and if the mother says, I don't want a baby, I don't want to mess up my life, you know, I have a way in which my life is going to go, and I don't want to take care of a child, there are men who will say, I will take the child. My mother, my father, or my family, we have created a village where we will take the child. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to ask you for anything. Like, there are situations like that. But if a woman never has that conversation with him and he never knows, or he finds out later, you take that opportunity away from that man. You know what I'm saying? You say, well, you're not involved. This is all me. You know what I mean? So it can't be like okay, well, yeah, you're integrally involved when it comes to supporting Roe v. Wade, but then you're not when it comes to making the final decision. You know what I'm saying?
I think they're integrally involved. The extent to which they will be able to be involved, though, is determined before the sex happens, though. And so that's why I can't say in that moment, like, she should talk to him. I would say, I think it's in her best interest to get the most amount of information that she can to make a well-informed decision. One of those, part of that information is speaking with the thing, but that's up to her decision. Understand that. And so my thing is, he's integrally involved. And but in order to get that communication on that back end after the person's pregnant, there needed to be communication before that happened. And that's why I'm thinking, like, but this is where sex education is so important, period, because sex is so much more than just like, you know, positions and like protection. It's also about relationships and connection and what is going to happen. And that's why I'm like, if there were more communication, because it presupposes that there's good communication already between the mother and the father, so that the mother feels as though she can even talk to the man. And if the man feels strongly about, to me, in situations like that, where it's like the man feels strongly to have this baby, it is like, it's almost like I'm thinking Keke Palmer's like, I'm sorry for that man, but it's like, bruh, that conversation needed to have happened before y'all did that, because there needs to be, and it's the same for her. I'm not saying either of them are off the hook at all. It's just that if he already feels strongly about that, you know, let me emphasize, no person who has sex does not know that the risk is to have a child. So if you know that you would like to have a child and that you would be responsible for it and that she doesn't need to have to worry about it, then that conversation needs to have happened before y'all were doing it. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't be a part of that conversation. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that that's enough to say to force her to then have to talk to him. I think all of that stuff is complicated, because I'm even thinking of like a really particular situation. Like, if that ended up happening, then I'm like, well, what would make her not talk to him? And what would make him want to do that now? I'm like, there is so specific, it's so case by case that I cannot tell a person from the outside that you should have done that. And that's why I'm like, I'm not going to tell them they should have. I'm going to say, you need to have as much information as you can. It's important for you to consider all the feelings and the lives that are involved in this decision, period. I'm not going to tell you who you should talk to or what you should be doing. I'm just going to suggest that we all need just education about this and learn how to communicate.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And, you know, I was just kind of thinking through that women bear the responsibility for getting pregnant or not getting pregnant as early as they start being like fertile. Is that the appropriate word to use? Like as early as they start like puberty and like having the potential to get pregnant.
Right.
Because I can think of like cases where, you know, 15-year-old girls have been put on birth control, 16-year-old girls have been put on birth control. You know, maybe they, you know, their parent found out that they're having sex, and so they're like, well, I'm gonna make sure that you're on birth control, you know, for whatever reasons. Or even young women who are young adults, meaning like 18 to 20, maybe 22, women who are college age, kind of taking that responsibility. And there are 50 million different ways that women like that are women's birth control, you know, like there's pills, there's patches, there's like IUDs, like there's a zillion different ways for women to control their own like pregnancy. And I think one of the main tools that men have, if they are interested in either having kids or not having kids, is being proactive. Because what I think this conversation after the fact does is switch the responsibility for men's feelings and what they want to do to the woman, as opposed to men being proactive and finding a partner who they can say, I'm not interested in having kids. Are we on the same page? Or I am interested in having kids. Like, would we be on the same page in that instance? Like that sort of proactive responsibility is just as much a responsibility for men as it is for women to, you know, consistently take that pill at the same time every day, or make sure that they get their patch switched out, you know, however, like at whatever the appropriate interval is, that they are taking responsibility. Men have responsibility too, to be proactive. And I understand, like, you know, there may be situations, I think it's probably far fewer than we're probably led to believe, where men have these conversations and then at the end of it, women are like, well, I don't care nothing about what you say, I'm gonna do what I want. Like, I think that's happens far less of the time, especially if the conversation was like a proactive conversation where folks were on the same page, like going in. And I think that the same like sort of principle that's applied to consent could be applied to this as well, in terms of like consent is not like a one-off conversation. It's not like I'm gonna just give you blanket consent for the rest of my life. It's like consent is active and it's ongoing. So I could consent to something at, you know, 6:30, and I could not consent to that same thing at 7:30. So it's like I have to consistently be consenting, and so men have to consistently be engaged in that conversation. Like, we were on this page at 6:30, it's 7:30 now, are you still on the same page?
And that's where I'm talking about like men being very involved in the process. And this is where I think this is why these conversations are so interesting to me, because it's like what ends up happening is it's like we focus on the idea of abortion rather than what is everything before that I think creates this whole situation. So it's just like by the time you get to the question of abortion, it's like, hey, like we needed to talk about a whole lot of other stuff.
I agree with that. For sure.
And so it's like, I'm like, and that's why I think it's really interesting that these different groups focus more on abortion than they focus on just sex education, period, because they're not going to talk about sex education, but they'll drill you about the fact that the baby needs a life, the heartbeat starts at whatever, the 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, so sex education is what has created so many of just social ills and problems, period. So sex education from talking about relationships, talking about pleasure, talking about sexually transmitted, what do they call them now? Infections instead of diseases, or whatever the illnesses, whatever they said, to also talking about consent. It's just like having all of these conversations and focusing more on sex education than focusing on abortion, I think would yield a whole lot better outcomes than focusing on whether it's the debate between pro-life and pro-choice. Like that's not even, I don't think that's the what would I call it? The fulcrum. I think where we really want to focus is like, can we talk to people about sex? Like I would love to see people really mandating sex education, but then that gets into the question of when is it too early to talk about sex education, gets into gender, sexuality, fluidity, all of that. And people are just not comfortable with that.
Right. I definitely agree with that part. Like before we even get to abortion, everything you said, sex education, there needs to be a huge overhaul with that. So I totally agree with that part. And you know, I do understand the level of authority that women have in that decision. And although I would have to say, at least where I stand right now, and again, just kind of thinking through it, I don't have any research or stats or anything to back it up, but I still do believe that it's necessary. It should be necessary for a woman to have a conversation, especially as long as it's not going to impact her life, right? Like she doesn't feel she's going to be harmed by saying this to the man. You know, I'm not talking about abusive relationships and stuff like that. Obviously, if it in a situation like that, you need to protect yourself and your child if you decide to have it. But if it is a consensual, healthy relationship, or semi-healthy where, you know, I don't want to say semi-healthy, but a consensual, healthy relationship where you're not going to be harmed by telling the father, then I think that's necessary. And I like the way Amber put it with gaining all the information. And part of that information is getting it from the father. But then I kind of felt there was this like shift, like, but I would suggest getting the information, but you don't have to get it from the father. And I'm just like, I don't know. I was like, they're still trying to leave him out of it. And I can't, it's hard for me to be okay with that.
I'm not trying to leave him out of it. Let me clarify. I'm not saying that he needs to be left out of it. My first thing is to say, I don't want to, I think it's so case specific. And so even like how you were just describing, it's like, well, the relationship needs to be healthy and then it needs to be this and it needs to be this. And it's like, that's the point. Like relationships are so complex and they have so many dynamics so that I cannot prescribe a principle for all relationships to say you should do this, because relationships have so many dynamics. And I'm like, it depends on the shape, the texture, the tenor of that relationship, what actually goes down. Because so that's the first thing. It's just like relationships are so specific. I can't speak to all relationships. I can't speak to what should happen in every relationship, especially when it comes to every sexual relationship. Every sexual relationship is not an actual, it might not be a friendship, it might not be a romantic relationship, it might not be anything. So that's even outside of that. And then the other piece of it is that in addition to that, I don't think I can decide for that woman or for that man, like who that woman has to decide, like if she can even consider all of the facts and things that can inform her decision. Like that is up to her. And of course, I don't want to use the ideal situation as the standard. And I think that's important to not say, well, in the ideal situation, then they would do this. But the ideal situation is rarely the standard. And so it's like to create kind of like a suggestion or a recommendation based on the ideal, that I don't think that is based enough in reality. And so that's why I'm very careful to say that it's so case specific, that no matter what the case is, I think the woman should use all of the information and resources to her disposal, including the man's opinion and feelings and thoughts, including the thoughts, feelings of her family, of who else it for her case. I think it behooves the woman in any situation to incorporate all of that to the extent that it makes sense. Because I can imagine situations where she might not include her parents, but she might include the father, and somebody else would say, well, how can she not include her parents? She should absolutely talk to her parents about it, no matter what, especially like say it's a teenage girl. But then you see how we're getting into the specifics of the situation. It's too many, like it's so case specific. And that's why I think it goes back to even Roe v Wade and the fact that a governmental body can tell people what to do with their bodies when we can't even create like create an example scenario that runs across enough examples to say, well, we think you should do this. But then for the government to be able to say that, that's crazy. Because we can think in our mind, we could come up, if we wanted to right now, we could come up with 5 different scenarios, each of us different. So 15 scenarios of all different situations where we would say, yes, she should have told him, or we would have feel like maybe she should have said something, or we would say, nah, I don't even think it matters. Or it would have been like, yeah, she might need to go straight to that. We can manufacture that right now. And so the government needs to recognize the nuance in human life. There is no one like, absolutely, you should always do that. That's where part of the problem is.
Well, then if that's the case, then is it fair for us, and I'm saying us, because I agree with all of us, to say that men should be involved in helping to ensure that this legislation does not get passed that overturns Roe v. Wade? If you just said that, to say in the universal, we maybe not shouldn't tell people what they should or shouldn't do. Should we say, well, men, you should be involved?
Well, I guess
absolutely.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying like in terms of what they should do with their bodies. So that's what I mean, like that kind of legislation. Although that's tricky, right? Because we had COVID and we're like, the legislation was everybody needed to wear masks. So we're like, everybody should wear masks so that they could prevent this, massive spread. And so I think men being involved in the conversation of Roe v. Wade is important, period. Yeah, I think that. And to be honest, the word should, ever since I would say like 2018, I've been trying to divorce myself from the usage of that word to be able to mandate anybody to do anything. So let me correct myself by even using the word should. I would say that it is, I think men that's synonymous. I think men need to ask themselves, let me do a more inquiry stance, because I think a lot of times when you tell people what to do, it doesn't actually help them, especially adults. You need to ask them to search themselves. And so for me, I would ask men, how do you see yourself having a role in this conversation? Where do you see yourself? And ask yourself why you see yourself there, and how you feel like you need to be involved in it. I can't tell him what to do because that's not going to help anyway. Human nature is to reject law.
Yeah, I think about men being involved from the capacity of the government doesn't have, from the stance of the government doesn't have the capacity to understand humanity. I'm speaking specifically about the US government, because dating back to its founding documents, they have been clear that they don't understand humanity and how they defined Black people within the Constitution, with how they define Black people and their right to, or excluded Black people from the rights that everyone else was granted, how they excluded women from those rights. Like, the government just doesn't have capacity to recognize humanity. And so I don't think that governmental legislation in recognizing humanity, particularly in this case, as it relates to like gender, is going to be helpful in the long run. And I think something that like consistently frustrates me is that for men of color and Black men in particular, a lot of times for the like men that I associate with, they'll have a very sharp analysis around race and racism and anti-Blackness. And they'll be able to like make connections between how a policy is used or how it can play out. But then when asked to apply that same analytical logic to gender, it's like they get stuck and like get stuck trying to like apply that same analytical process. And I'm like, how do you not understand that a state that could easily sanction violence against you and against your body can easily sanction violence against mine? Like, how can you not like understand that? So that's just like my own little like trying to like frustration of trying to like work through how people aren't able to make that parallel leap. But I think just from the perspective of like governmental tools are often like parallel, and we should analyze them as such, like in terms of the government has capacity to visit violence upon Black bodies. It has capacity to visit violence upon Indigenous bodies. It has capacity to visit violence upon women's bodies. Like men should just understand that sort of overarching sort of framework and take action from that stance. And I even said your forbidden word, Amber. Like men should do this. Men should do whatever they want. But you know, I would be very happy if I saw more men taking that stance.
Me too.
Yeah. I this kind of leads me to think about something my mentor, Dr. Ifeoma Kwesi, she used to say back in undergrad. She would say, she was talking about it from a religious standpoint, but I think it's very applicable here. Don't major in the minors.
Exactly.
And while the part of the conversation about talking to the father, I think that's a minor part. And the overall important point of it is important for us to not perpetuate state sanctioned violence on bodies, particularly Black bodies, period. And so I don't want anybody listening to this to get caught up in that part of the conversation and use that to try to divide us, because we can continue to have these more nuanced gendered conversations around abortion and that, you know, whatever. But at the end of the day, at least here on Street Academy Podcast, we, you know, collectively agree that particularly for Black people, because we all about Black folks. So particularly for Black men and women, I think it would be in our best interest to be involved in fighting against any legislation that, you know, promotes state-sanctioned violence against the Black bodies of Black women. First, because it is through Black women that we are here. Black women are the mothers, the foundation. They are the, you know, the rock of our nation. And so that needs to be protected first, but then also against Black men as well. So
and Black trans folks and non-binary.
And non-binary and anybody who comes from the motherland, who is of the African diaspora. So all of those people need to be protected. And once that's done, then we can deal with any nuanced conversations we need to have, but we are all in agreement on that for sure.
Fair.
Yeah. And I mean, just to like add to that, I think the option for choice is always the better option. Like the option to, or the lack of option to be forced into something, you know, I think it's just as likely that there is a man who's like, oh, I want to have a baby, as there is a man who's like, I don't want to have a baby. And by extension, taking away that woman's choice takes away men's choice as well. So to be able to say, I don't want to have a baby. And so just like from that perspective, like choice is always good. Like it's always good for you to make decisions about your own life.
Absolutely.
But then what is our takeout box?
Oh,
I don't know.
Well, that was
I'm gonna let y'all go.
Yeah, that was mine.
That was yours?
Can be applied to my takeout box.
Dang. Okay,
Well,
I gotta think
sounded
about
like,
it.
that sounded like your takeout box, the whole idea of just choice being.
I think so. Let's go with that.
My takeout box will be sex education. Now I feel like I need to be on like a campaign for sex education, because I'm like, we've gotten, like, once you get to the abortion conversation, we're already too far.
Too late. Yeah,
like,
too late.
We're too late. We're too late. Because it's like,
sure.
By that time, you would hope that the people are informed enough and have the information, the tools, resources to make the decision that's best for them, and we'll trust that they will do that. You know, that's like that idea. Sex education, needed more. I know I needed it more. So
yeah, for sure.
There we go. All right then.
I love it. Everybody good? All hearts and minds clear?
I
know everybody fired up.
Yes. Yeah.
No, this was a good episode. We touched on some top. It was like, oh, should we go there? Let's go there. Let's get it. Let's talk about it. Let's have those conversations. But I think this is necessary, and this was good. So I'm glad we did it. It's been another episode, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the streets. And we are out. Cool.
That got their feet upon the neck of the haters, the game and the devil like came in.